6 weeks after my first baby was born, I was standing at the kitchen stove. My back still ached. My hands trembled faintly from a night that had lasted longer than I had managed to sleep. The baby was in the next room. My mother-in-law was seated at the table. She had arrived before 6 that morning, before I had come downstairs, and she moved through my kitchen the way she moved through her own, with complete and unquestioned familiarity. I was lifting the cast-iron pot when I heard her say something to the woman beside her. Pennsylvania Dutch, spoken low, not intended for me. I caught 4 words. She's not ready. He chose poorly. I set the pot down. I did not turn around. And in that moment, I understood that the 6 weeks had not been what I thought they were. What I had taken for care was something else entirely. It had been an evaluation. And I had just been told my result. 6 weeks after giving birth, I learned that becoming a mother and being accepted as a wife were not the same thing. I had believed these women were there to help me. What they were actually doing was watching me. I had not known those were 2 different activities until it was far too late to perform any differently. To anyone outside, it would have looked like care. To us, it was care that kept a record. In my community, the 6 weeks following birth carried a name, Wochenbett, or what the women around me called weekbed. The idea, on its surface, was straightforward enough. A new mother needed to recover, to heal, to find her footing with her baby before the full weight of the household returned to her shoulders. The older women would come. They would cook and clean and hold the baby so the mother could rest. To anyone looking in from the outside, this was one of the most striking and beautiful aspects of Amish community life. The way people arrived without being called. The way no one had to ask. And part of it was beautiful. I want to say that plainly because it is true. But there was something running beneath it that was never spoken aloud. They brought food, but they watched the kitchen while they cooked it. They held the baby, but they watched the way I held her first. They washed the dishes, but they noted whether the dishes had needed washing. Weak bed was not only rest. Weak bed was a verdict being assembled. The 6 weeks a new mother was given to heal were also the 6 weeks the women around her spent deciding what kind of wife she was. My mother-in-law arrived before I had come downstairs, before my husband Daniel had finished his coffee. She had already cleaned the stove by the time I walked into the kitchen. 2 other women were with her, her sister and an older woman from the church whose opinion carried a particular weight that no one ever stated directly, but everyone understood completely. They greeted me with warmth. They told me to sit. They poured my coffee. They asked how the baby had slept through the night. And while they asked, their eyes moved to the counter, to the floor, to the dishes from the night before that I had not yet gotten to. No one mentioned the dishes. That was the precision of it. The assessment moved through silence, the way all the things that truly mattered in my world moved through silence. They asked how we were feeling, not how I was feeling. We, the family, the household as a whole, the verdict. I did not know there was a script, and so for the first 3 weeks I gave honest answers. When my mother-in-law asked how I was feeling, I said I was tired. Tired, I would later understand, meant weak. When she asked how Daniel was managing, I said he had been up with me through the night. A husband losing sleep meant his wife could not manage on her own. When she asked about the baby, I told her she had cried for 4 hours the night before. A baby that cried that long meant something was wrong with the feeding, which meant something was wrong with the mother. The correct answer, the answer I did not yet know existed, sounded something like, "The Lord has been so good to us." Daniel had a warm breakfast this morning. The baby is such a blessing. A deflection, an offering. Praise distributed outward to everyone except yourself. I did not know the script, so for 3 weeks I answered honestly, and by the 3rd week I felt something change. The visits grew shorter, the smiles thinned. My mother-in-law began bringing her own cloth from home, not because she needed it, because mine was apparently not clean enough. She said nothing about that. She did not need to. One evening, Daniel came in from the barn and asked me very quietly whether everything was all right between me and his mother. I said yes. He said, "She thinks you're struggling." I said, "I had just had a baby." He looked at the floor for a long time. Then he said, "She thinks you're not grateful." I had not known there was a script, so I gave honest answers. Honest answers were the wrong ones. Gratitude in that world was not a feeling. It was a performance. And for 3 weeks the stage had been set and lit, and no one had told me I was the one being watched. The women came on the final day of the 6th week. They brought pie. They held the baby. They told me I looked well. By then I had learned enough to give the right responses. The baby is a blessing. Daniel had a warm breakfast. The Lord has been good to us. I thought I had finally managed it. I thought I was passing. And then my mother-in-law leaned toward her sister and said 3 words in Pennsylvania Dutch, low-voiced, not meant for me. He chose poorly. I stood at the stove with my back to them. The cast iron pot was heavy in my hands. I did not turn around, because turning around would have told them I had heard. And a woman who heard those words and said nothing was at least still demonstrating the right kind of obedience. I had failed a test I had not known I was sitting. 2 years later, my second baby was born. This time I knew the script. The Lord is good. Daniel had a hot breakfast. The baby is a blessing. I am not tired. I am not in pain. I am not afraid. For the first 3 weeks I performed it without breaking. The women nodded. My mother-in-law's face softened. The temperature in the room rose. I told myself, this time I am passing. But my body was not passing. I was bleeding more than I should have been. I went dizzy when I stood too quickly. I was nursing through a fever I had told no one about. In the 3rd week, I fainted in the kitchen. Daniel drove me to the hospital that afternoon. The women came when they heard, and lying in that hospital room, I understood something I had not understood before. The test was not only words. The test was whether my body could disappear politely. The first time I had failed because I did not know the rules. The second time I had failed because I had followed them until they nearly took me under. Daniel was not a cruel man. He had driven me to the hospital. He had sat in the waiting room turning his hat in his hands, looking frightened. But when we came home, he did not know how to see me as a woman who had been hurt. He only knew how to see me as a wife who had not stayed strong enough. I was not the only one. There was Anna, held up in our district as the model of what a young wife should be. Calm, grateful, capable. She had passed her week bed all 3 times. The women pointed to her as the example the rest of us should follow. Years later, after I had left, I learned that Anna had made it through those 6-week stretches by taking a homemade nerve tonic, herbs from her own garden, every morning, quietly, alone. The only way she had survived 3 week beds was by chemically separating herself from what her body was feeling while the women were watching. The model wife, the standard we were all measured against. She had passed the test by learning to feel nothing while the eyes were on her. There was Esther, who smiled through every quilting bee, every community frolic, every church gathering for years. When you looked closely at her eyes, what you found there was something I can only describe now as the look of a person who has been waiting a very long time for something she has quietly stopped expecting. There was Katie, whose mother-in-law came to help for 3 months after the birth of her first child. Katie told me once, in a very low voice, that she had not understood. The help was also instruction, until the morning her mother-in-law rearranged her kitchen without asking. Some women passed because they memorized the script. Some passed because they stopped feeling. Some of us failed because our bodies refused to lie. Years later, in a therapist's office, I tried to describe those 6 weeks. Not the birth itself, not the physical pain. The watching. The way every meal I cooked was simultaneously a demonstration of my fitness. The way every answer I gave was simultaneously evidence in a case being built about me. The way care and evaluation had been braided together so tightly that I had never once, not in any moment of those weeks, been able to tell them apart. My therapist listened for a long time. Then she said, What you're describing is not care. It's a control mechanism wearing the costume of care. I sat with that for a while. It named something I had been carrying for years without being able to put it down. They were not evil women. My mother-in-law was not a cruel woman. She had been tested in exactly the same way. Her mother-in-law had sat at her table. Her kitchen had been examined. Her answers had been weighed. She had survived it. And she passed down what she had received, the way you pass down anything you have mistaken for wisdom. They were women who had endured the same test and confused endurance with knowledge. Real care does not keep a record. Real help does not deliver a verdict. A new mother does not need to prove she has earned the right to be exhausted. I have a daughter now. She will never lie in a weak bed being scored. If she has a child one day, I will not be checking whether her kitchen is clean. I will not be asking whether her husband had a hot breakfast. I will not be counting the dishes in the sink. I will sit beside her and I will say, You are tired. That is allowed. You are becoming a mother. That is enough. I am not telling you this to make you angry at the women who arrived with their pies and their watching eyes. Most of them genuinely believed they were doing what was right. The problem was not the women. The problem was a system that transformed the most tender and vulnerable weeks of a woman's life into an audition and called that transformation community. If you were ever cared for in a way that felt like being observed, I see you. If you were exhausted and told to perform gratitude, I see you. If your body tried to speak a truth that your words were not permitted to say, I see you. If any of this found you somewhere real, leave a word below. Tell me about a test you did not know you were being given. And the next story I want to tell you is about the morning I finally understood I had already been gone for a long time, not the day I walked away. The morning, months before that, when I stopped waiting for things to get warmer, when I understood that the warmth was never coming, and that I had known that for longer than I had allowed myself to admit.